Hey y'all, it's Kenyatta, host of ACLU of Georgia's podcast, Liberty is Peachy. In this episode, I'm joined by Shelly, Monique, Sharice, and Wes. Each of them participated in the coordination and oversight of Georgia's general election as ACLU of Georgia legal observers. Enjoy. Well, first off, I just want to say it is a pleasure to be virtually sitting down with each of you. Um, Coming off of what we're coming off of on the heels of the general election. And one thing that I love about this platform is the kind of behind the scenes insight that it gets when I get the chance and the opportunity to speak with the actual doers and the movers on the ground that make our democracy work. So super excited for this conversation. What I'll do first is just go around, and I know it's different on everyone's screen, so I'll call out just so that each of y'all can introduce yourselves and say where you volunteered with and what part of the process that you held down. So I will start with Shelly.
Well, I am Shelly Carroll. I'm the legal observer coordinator for ACLU of Georgia. So I've been here through this election process, starting with the general and into the audit and on to the impending runoffs. And I'm happy to see all these faces of amazing legal observer volunteers on the screen today.
Yes, yes. And then I will move on to Sharice.
Good morning. I'm Sharice Woolridge. I came on a week before the election to help organize Columbus, Macon, and Albany with Shelly. I live in Columbus, and also I helped with the audit this past week. Yes.
Good deal. And then I'll go on to Monique.
Hi, I'm Monique Campito. I'm a resident of Atlanta. I've only been here about 4.5 years, so still kind of a newbie to the election process in Georgia, and got involved with the ACLU just about 2 months ago to help close out the election cycle. So I had the opportunity to legal observe on election day at numerous polling sites, and then at a count the vote rally after election day. I was signed up for the recount, but it finished in record time. So I never actually got the opportunity to join on that. So that's my experience. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and hear everyone else's experiences and stories too.
Absolutely. And it's awesome to have you. And then last but certainly not least, I will move on to Mr. Wes.
Hi, thank you. This is Wes Harris. I'm here in Atlanta. And I signed on to Legal Observe for Election Day and also went to a Freedom Park rally. And glad to be with ACLU Georgia. So thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And it's really exciting to hear like the scope of the people that we have on the ground here in Atlanta, which, you know, that's a beast in and of itself, the metro area, but then also in the key important areas like Columbus and Macon. So I'm so excited to have you guys here in different points with us. So I have a few exciting questions written down. And the first one I will start off with is, what inspired you to volunteer with the ACLU of Georgia? Were there any, historic personal points for you that you were like, okay, I need to get involved now? Just curious, and I'd love to give our listeners that little bit of personal insight. Oh, and anybody, we can popcorn it, so whoever wants to jump in.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So like I mentioned, yeah, I've been a resident of Georgia for about 4.5 years. So still new to the process, but during the 2018 senator elections, just kind of being a voter and experiencing the long lines and, the acts kind of really of voter suppression that are going on, and that became normalized. That just really struck a chord with me. And then, it's kind of been sitting and waiting to come out and get involved. And then just with everything, all the social injustice and marches that were going on this year, that just really, I think, ignited the flame in me. And I just became a lot more involved in attending protests and educating myself on a lot more issues. And trying to figure out how I could help and what space I would fit in. So over the summer, I attended a couple of marches and saw the legal observer team there. And I was kind of like, I wonder what they're doing and who they are.
Mhm.
I looked up a little bit about them and then saw another legal observer when I voted during the primaries this summer. And so I finally just stopped and asked her, what are you doing and how do you get involved? I thought you had to be an attorney to get involved. And she said, no, you can just be anyone, you attend a training and boom, you're on the team. So I was like, awesome, this sounds like the perfect fit for me. And have just kind of hit the ground running with that. So I've been a volunteer for 2 months now. And it's been a great experience. I just can't wait to see, what else we can do and where we'll go with this.
Totally. And Monique, you really just said a little bit of a recipe that I want a lot of folks to listen to, when all it takes is simply evaluating and looking at what's going on a social level and comparing that up against your compassion and find ways to get involved. And like you said, you thought you had to be an attorney, but look at the many different ways that you can get involved, and that's all it
Mm-hmm.
takes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
excellent, awesome. Not to jump in before, I didn't want to cut anybody else off that wanted to jump in.
Well, it's interesting for me because I volunteered. I'm a contract employee with ACLU now, but I volunteered this summer. Much like Monique just said, with the protests and the energy that was here in Atlanta, especially after the death of George Floyd, and how it just seemed like you had a choice to sit by and watch what was happening, or to take a stand for something else. So I started, I exactly like you, one of my friends posted on Instagram that she was doing legal observing with ACLU. I said, what is that? Like, I want to do that. That sounds like something I could do.
Right.
At that point, I had even not really done anything social because, COVID. And so I hadn't even thought of going down, but I thought, well, like, this is something that I believe in and that I want to stand for. So if I'm going to go out in the world and in public, this is the reason I'm going to do it. So I volunteered. I became a legal observer. I became what Chris is deemed a super volunteer, and it sort of led to this. It's interesting too around elections, because I started getting really curious about what was happening in our election process here in Georgia, because I worked voter suppression in 2018. So it was a real eye-opening experience for me. It was. I mean, let's be honest. As a white woman, it was like really opening my eyes to see how much was actually happening. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Not if you're paying attention. And so I wanted to really be involved in these elections. I also stood in line during the primaries for 8.5 hours at Park Tavern. I had planned on volunteering that day, and I didn't, because I had to vote.
Right.
So it's been an interesting process of watching what happens. And I've had a lot of personal experiences with voting in Georgia. I got divorced and I changed my name, and I was unenrolled from, yeah. So, there you go. I had to I caught it and I voted, but I know that happens all the time. And sort of seeing the sneaky ways that people get disenfranchised. And I wanted to be a big part of making this process safe and transparent and accessible to as many people as possible. So it's been a real learning experience for me.
Absolutely. And you know what, guys, I just want to say to everyone so far, this is fantastic. And it really is a unifying moment for me, just this conversation alone, because what it does is it reveals the issue, the voter suppression issue. If we are all in different regions, in different parts of this state, it's experiencing the same things in the same elections, the work that we do here, it's important, and it eradicates those issues. So again, this is great. And not to jump in ahead of Sharice or Wes, if you guys wanted to throw anything in.
Okay, yeah, I very much like Monique and Shelly. I jumped into the AC. I've known about the ACL for many, many years, like in high school. But I jumped in with Ahmaud Arbery. I felt it happened like the height of COVID, and I felt paralyzed. We're in Georgia. Everybody's watching Georgia, but we can't move. The ACLU was moving, right? One of the few organizations, and no shade to anyone else that couldn't mobilize or get going, but the ACLU had a presence on Twitter and social media about Ahmaud Arbery, and I saw somebody on a bike with a vest on. So I was like, yay, I made a donation. And then I got on the volunteer list. So that's how I got involved with it. I was like, I got to do something. I can't go to Glenn County. I'm on the other side of Georgia.
Mm-hmm,
And it's
mm-hmm.
COVID, and I was scared, but the ACLU was making moves with the Ahmaud Arbery, and I was like, yay. So I made a donation, got involved. Much like the primary, I couldn't vote on time because I got there at 7 a.m., a little bit before, and the voting machines weren't working. So I was incredibly frustrating. The voter protection hotline was swamped. I had to vote on paper, which felt like a ripoff since we spent so much money on those voting machines. So very, very frustrated after the primary. And I know voter protection and Fair Fight does a lot, but there needed to be more support. And I chanced upon this, and I felt like this is a good way to help out with voter problems and flag things because there were so many flags on the primary, long lines, voter machines not working. And I was like, yay, being on the ground and not worrying about a hotline. And then I called the hotline and it called me back a month later in July. I was like, what? So we can't have this in the general. So I'm glad that the legal observers stepped in to help because it was a mess for the primary.
Yeah. And there really was like I felt it. There was like an energy shift after the primaries because of all the problems. And I mean, it made headlines. So the attention and the care that went into preparing for the general election, it was fantastic. And I guess that was like the blooming rose from the thorny stem of the primary. So absolutely. And not to jump in before you, Wes, because I know you've been waiting.
Yeah, thanks, Kenyatta. So I grew up in Atlanta and spent the last 20 years on the West Coast and mostly in California, but the last 8 was in Seattle, where in Washington State, everything's vote by mail. So came back here. I've been back here for about 2 years now. And, as everyone has said, when I saw what was going on with the primaries, I really wanted to get involved and, do what I could do to stem, any type of voter intimidation, voter suppression. And it seemed like teaming up with ACLU was the best way to do that. So I was just glad that I could get involved, make a difference, especially after everything that was going on. I spent a lot of time in the neighborhood where Rashard Brooks was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So that made a difference there. So I'm just glad to be able to be involved.
Absolutely. And all of you guys' responses is the excellent segue into my next question. As we're talking about, the primaries kind of like made us all spring into action. So after, all the prep and all the work that went into going into the general election, how did it feel participating in the election process of what we now know is the historic, well, we knew even before then it was going to be historic, but how does it feel having participated in the process of the general election? And however, we should make Wes, actually, yeah, Wes, since we make you wait every time.
Well, it's definitely exciting to be part of the process, and to be out there during the general. I spent a lot of time in Fulton and Gwinnett, which was exciting for me because I went to high school in Gwinnett. I kind of grew up in both of those counties, and it was good to be like back and trying to help make a difference now in both counties, and sort of popping back and forth between the two and being on sort of a roving team going back and forth, and even spent some time in Lawrenceville, which is as I mentioned where I went to high school. So it was good to sort of be out there, and it was a good homecoming for me to be process that day. I appreciated that.
Absolutely. And like you said, you're newly back to Georgia, so this was one heck of a homecoming, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then if any ladies, whoever wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say it felt like I was like fully waking up, I guess. Just like Shelly said, everything going on the last couple of years just really struck a chord. And I had the same moment where I was like, I can't just sit back and not be a participant in this process. And, you know, I tried to find various ways, and there were so many volunteers, to your point, Kenyatta, that since 2018, I think so many organizations mobilized and were like, enough is enough. And it was beautiful to see so many volunteers, and almost to the point where it was like, oh, there isn't is there a place for me still? You know, have they maxed out on volunteers? But you know, the ACLU just stepped up, and I like was so excited, honestly, just to see what they're doing and just completely be even deeper in the process and really learn about the ins and outs. Because I feel like, you know, we all go through civics class in middle school, and you kind of learn about, you know, voting, and but it's like, okay, I passed the test, next.
Right.
And now I'm just like really learning so much more about the process, and, you know, the intricacies and how complicated it really is. It's just been amazing. I don't know. I'm just nerding out on the whole thing, and it's just been eye-opening and exciting for me to be involved.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like, and to Shelly's point earlier, again, when she mentioned 2018, Sharice and Monique and we all immediately had like the same reaction. And that's how you know. So, and that's one of the, I'll say one of the cherries on top of one of the really sweet benefits of getting involved is that you get to learn and experience firsthand a lot of the intricacies and background information, and that knowledge it's invaluable, and it simply takes getting involved. So,
Yep.
And I see you unmuted, Shelly, so go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I was going to say that election day itself was an interesting thing because it was very calm. I think all of us expected there to be there was some chaos. I mean, I can tell you that that we were deployed a couple of places, you know, with someone who was armed, like making verbal threats on people who were waving signs, and you know, like there were you know, incidences of things like that, or you know, lots of people with election paraphernalia, like blocking a polling place. And that happened, it did. And we expected it. But so much less than what we expected. You know, election day was calm. I do think that is because there was so much preparation that went into it.
Yes.
And that's with ACLU. I've got some numbers I can tell you. Leading in the 2 weeks leading up to the election, we, myself and Chris Bruce, trained 202 new legal observers in the 2 weeks before. That's a lot. We staffed about 146 people on election day. So we had 146 people in blue vests on election day throughout the state of Georgia. And that's all over the state. We had them in Glenn County and Chatham County and Lumpkin County and Doherty and Muskogee and Macon-Bibb and Fulton, all of the metro counties. And yeah, 17 of them. We had 17 counties and 187 precincts staffed at some point during election day. And it was calm, right? And that has a lot to do with like our preparation and the ACLU in general, and also all of the other organizations that stepped up to make sure that we had these free, transparent elections. So there was an ease to election day that was unexpected. Yeah. And at the same time, I think that is the result, though, of not 2 weeks of work, but of years of work and years of paying attention. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, because I was thinking, like, even on my end, being on staff with ACLU of Georgia on election day, it was almost kind of eerie at certain points because we were like ready, you know, we were all locked in, loaded. But that speaks to the point of the preparedness and of all of that front end work that went into it. So totally.
I was going to say that, like, election day in Columbus and Albany and Macon, it was like calm as well. But the outreach of the community, like, there was two precincts in Columbus where they were at churches, and the pastors like ordered like 50 sausage biscuits. So when I was like riding around checking on organizers, they're like, "You good?" They're like, "Yeah, they fed us." So and then a lot of the partisan organizations that came from out of state, very friendly. Everybody had their lawn chairs out and were, you know, doing their thing, and we all got along. And if somebody needed to go to the bathroom, there was some coordination. So there was a lot of teamwork, or, you know, if there was a question that somebody didn't know the answer to that we all thought was like an issue, you know, there was some coordination and cooperation and a little drama between organizations, because there were a lot of different groups or acronyms that I'd never heard of. They're like, "Yeah, we're from Maryland." I'm like, "Okay," you know? So you have to get to know people, and I imagine the runoff is going to be insane as well. But there were so many organizations from out of state in Columbus and Albany and Macon, and we're like, oh, cool, nice to meet you. A lot of nonpartisan, they all for the greater good. But there was a group effort at different precincts. So,
and I love that. And what that speaks to, it's kind of Shelley's point, because she mentioned like the Chatham counties and down there in Columbus. And when we look at, how the election played out here in our state, some of those were areas where it took a little bit longer to get those counts in. So having those people down there on the ground, giving that care and giving that vigilance and overwatching the recounts and the audits and the counts, that care, it shows in those instances and in those counties. So yeah, we showed up and we were there, and it spoke. So super excited.
I think too that there were some things that were interesting that I just want to acknowledge too about our volunteers, is that one of the places that we had not expected any issues, because you have the precincts that you expect historically have had issues, so you're keeping your eye on it. But none of us had Spalding County on our minds. Like, nobody was paying attention to Spalding County, and the entire county went down. Like, there were no working voting machines in the entire county, like 18 precincts. And we had legal observers who left Floyd County and went to Spalding County and went to every single one of those precincts. Like, it was magnificent. It was like a really amazing thing to see people just be willing to, to switch, to pivot, to mobilize, and how great that was. And just across the state, anytime something like that happens, people were willing to go, because it was a real stand for each other. Like, it wasn't like, Sharice is in Columbus and she's only worried about Columbus. It was like we were all looking out for each other, like, globally, which was, I think, one of the reasons that there was so much less chaos than we expected.
Absolutely. And we kind of started hitting on it, but I want to dive a little bit more deeper into, as claims of irregularities began to arise after the general election and recounts began statewide, how did you feel, each of you, about your roles in the democratic process as all eyes began to turn toward Georgia? Because these races, the overall state race was close, and then we started seeing like, okay, these Senate races are getting kind of close, and then all the attention, and here we are. But I want to know how you thought about your specific parts in that, because I mean, we talk about the general election being the historic moment, but the history really continues. So how do you feel about that?
So with Georgia being so close, a lot of our observers helped people find their precincts. When they came out, they didn't know where to go, because a lot of people got turned away it being a military town. So we went to the website and directed them to their correct precinct. And some of their precincts were in the next county, but they had enough time to drive. So I felt, and we all felt like, man, we help people vote and get their vote counted. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, and that's what it's all about. That's what the work of the ACLU of Georgia is all about, is ensuring that right to everyone, regardless of party, because the function of the democratic process, it has to work for all of us. We're all here, right? So that is just super exciting to hear. Thanks for that, Sharice.
Thank you.
So I too, Sharice, like you, felt like, even though it was kind of minor, maybe what I was doing on election day, it really did matter. So I was out there starting at 7 a.m. with the other legal observers, and I was scheduled to go to one county and ended up not going there, ended up staying local because there was more of a need in Atlanta. And with that, I was stationed at one polling location. And like Shelley, I expected it to be a lot wilder than it was, but it was like the most calm day I had ever witnessed. There was one line, and it was at 6:45 a.m. before the polling location opened. They opened and they got everyone through. Maybe within 10 minutes, all the voters were in and out. And that was like basically the story of the day. From that one location, I ended up pivoting to maybe about 10 different and polling locations in Metro Atlanta. And they all said the same thing. There were multiple groups out there. Fair Fight was out. I think Voter Protection Hotline, I maybe had some people out. And there were just so many groups of people volunteering, and they were saying the same thing, like, oh, this is so weird. I I expected, much more to be happening, but I've helped some people with their absentee ballots who didn't get them cast in time, or I helped some people, identify their correct precinct. But really, other than that, I've just been hanging out in the sun on this gorgeous day. And it's like, that's kind of been the story all around, which was, I kind of like to feel like I'm doing a bit more. So I had to take a step back and like tell myself, oh no, you're still doing things. And this is actually good that it's such a smooth process, because everyone woke up and, like you said, Shelly, has been working for years and years to really see this beautiful outcome. So, at first it was a little bit jarring to me, but I think it was kind of awesome to see that was the result in at least the 10 locations that I went to. And then just to speak to, the number of people that were out volunteering, not even with an organization. I was at one precinct at 7 p.m. Just helping them close up. And there was a group of people from a coffee shop that had bought coffee and donuts because they expected this long line at the end of the day. And they were like, we want to make sure that everyone can still stay, and if they need some coffee to stay energized. And they were there and they were like, so there's no one here. Do you want coffee? And I was like, I mean, I guess so. But, it was great to see, like, they weren't with an organization at all. It was just a group of friends that got together and decided, we want to make sure, like you said, that every vote is counted and people don't get discouraged like they did in previous years. And there was none of that. So it was awesome to see. I felt like it, things were really working. And then going into the runoffs, it makes me feel like the work is clearly not over. Like, Georgia is more important than ever to the country. And there's no way I can stop being involved at this point. So, telling my friends, resharing stuff on social media is right now what I've been doing. And I've already gotten some people messaging me with questions during the recount about how to make sure their ballot was counted, and just friends that think, oh, well, maybe Mo knows now that she's been working with ACLU. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I guess I better learn a little bit more so that I can tell.
Yeah, you're the resident expert now.
Yeah. But it's been cool. I mean, sorry, that's a long-winded explanation, but yeah, I just really feel like the work's not over. Like, it's just the beginning for us.
Totally. And Monique, it's great because what you're speaking to is when we all rise up and feel the needs of these civic duties, we can see, like, okay, this is how a smooth election is run. And then what that also does is when we get instances where when you encounter someone there that can't find their correct precinct, or is trying to figure out where they need to return their absentee ballot on election day, you guys being there and being that resource, what that does is further along and fortify democracy in our democratic process. And when everything else is smooth and we can be free enough to have these little instances, we can see these are the instances where the vote may be stopped, and it's not as crazy and chaotic because we have everything that we need and the care has been applied and dedicated where it needs to be. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
And I see you, Shelly. I see you wanting to hop in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that some of the places that historically have had lots of issues turned into party atmospheres. Like, we had some precincts in Southwest Atlanta that were full on, like, with bands, and like they had so many different lime warmers from so many different organizations that, like, you couldn't. It was like going over to your grandmother's house who keeps feeding you. Like, everywhere you went, it was like, do you want something to eat? Do you want something to eat? Do you want something to eat? Like, this constant community support and involvement. Like, it's something that I've seen, like, even like pre-election, even going back to when I got involved with legal observing with ACLU, is, during the protest, people on the streets handing out bottles of water, handing out granola bars, like that idea, that we say it like it takes a village a lot, right? But this idea that we live in this really big world, but really we don't, right? Like, really we're in these small communities and people are really taking care of each other. So there's a definite feeling of that. And it feels really empowering to be part of that. it also feels empowering, I think, to be part of knowing that what we do, like Monique said, sometimes it feels small. Like, is what I'm doing right now making a difference? And the answer is absolutely. Like, because, knowing that ACLU of Georgia is watching, right? Like, knowing that their eyes on something, like there's a lot less. I say this a lot when I'm training legal observers. It's like you don't do the thing you're not supposed to do when you're a little kid, when your mother is right there watching, right? You wait till she leaves the room, but it's like, you might be going to do it, but you don't do it when you know there's oversight, when you know that, when you know that there's transparency. And so this just adds, I think, such a big level of transparency that it just creates an environment for people to do better. And that's really what we're trying to do, right? Is just let everyone vote. Like, isn't that a big thing? Isn't that what we're founded on? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? And it's really nice when we get to see that happen more. I mean, I realize that we have a lot of work to do. And I feel like we've come a really long way from even just 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And everything, honestly, thus far in our conversation speaks to my next question, but I will ask it directly. How has experiencing this side of the voting process impacted you and your views on civic duty and getting involved?
I think for me, maybe just seeing how many people care, just across the state, then nationwide. And, like, I've had friends in Arizona contacting me saying, hey, we're watching Georgia, keep up the great work, or, friends in California saying the same. And I think just seeing that people are watching, and that all these organizations and the whole community is coming together, because this is so important. Like, it should be a simple thing to make sure every vote is counted, and unfortunately it hasn't been. But if everyone's doing all this work to make sure your vote is counted, like, as a citizen, even if you're not involved in any organization, like, the smallest thing you can do then is vote. Like that's
Exactly.
that's hugely important too. And so I think it's just shown me that, like, the entire process from beginning to end is so important. So it's important for every citizen of the country to just use their right, and the right that people have fought for hundreds of years, and that now all these organizations are banding behind, is making sure that everyone, regardless of your political affiliation or your ideas, that everyone's voice is heard. Like, I think it should be a beautiful thing for people across the country, across the world, really, to see, is that everyone finds it so important. So everyone should play their part in this election, if as much as they can.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Go ahead, Sharice. Sorry to cut you
Yeah,
off.
I agree. I think, like, as far as the audit, I think the way we mobilized so quickly, and every county counted differently. But I know our Board of Elections in Muskogee County was impressed with the ACLU, because they called an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. on Friday, and we were there. They're like, how? But, Shelly sent me a text on Thursday, and we mobilized, and we had a lot of representatives for the training. And then they're like, okay, who can stay till 11? And they were starting to count. And Muskogee County wasn't listed on the spreadsheet to start their count till Monday, but our ACLU in Muskogee County was ready for Friday at 11 a.m. And we were just ready to go. We were ready for, I in my head, I was like, well, maybe they'll start Saturday in my head. But they were like, if you can stay at 11, we're going to start at 11. So I was like, who here can stay at 11? And then I'll pick up the afternoon. But we were ready. And that just goes to show how important people know this audit was, and we're ready to go last minute, mobilize. And then Albany was able to as well get people. So it's just great to be a part of this and able to move. And I was proud of my team for just being ready. I'm like, how can you do this? They're like, no, this is important. I'll cancel.
Yeah, and that dynamic level of mobilization, especially in instances like that, a lot of times that's what it takes. And it's really empowering to hear that we have that level of vigilance and that level of ready to take action. So fantastic. I didn't want to cut off. I thought I saw Wes wanting to hop in there. Was I?
Yeah, what was really powerful to me is in what I'm hearing everyone saying here, and is really obvious, is you can see the through line from people's frustration, like real on the ground frustration from the primary,
Mm-hmm.
that leads to civic engagement. Organizations mobilize, people donate, volunteers get involved, and that really changed things in the general. And that's going to change things in the runoff again. So you can see that through line between a broken process, some problems, and then those actions that lead to solutions. So
That is an excellent point. Yeah.
that's really impressive to see that civic engagement cause a change. So,
Yeah.
thanks.
And it's really civic engagement caused the change based off of the issues that we all encountered. So that leads me into my final question. After everything, why do you believe it's important to get involved? Simply just to get involved, even on the basic level of volunteering.
I would love to jump in right there. I think that one of the biggest things to remember for all of us is that I don't think that if we don't step up and vote, if we don't step up and make sure that like everyone has that right to vote, we're all going to lose it. It's like this idea that like if we ever think that there's only going to be one group of people disenfranchised, we're going to have a really nasty surprise at some point. That people who have like power, absolute power corrupts, right? And so people who have absolute power have an interest in not everyone getting the right to vote, right? Like the more that we stand up for ourselves to use our voice, the more that, whether your involvement is simply voting, right? That might be the only thing that you do, but it is such a crucial point. If you take that one step farther and you use your knowledge about like where to go, right, Mo? Like, like you're going to tell your friends how to register or where to go. That's another step, another level. Like you don't have to necessarily put on a blue vest and like go out. You don't necessarily have to join an organization and go out. If you have pre-existing conditions and you're in a pandemic, you can do all this work from home. You can just call your friends and tell them where to pick up an absentee ballot. Like every little tiny bit counts. If you don't believe that your vote counts, look at how close like our elections have been. They just keep getting closer and closer to like every cycle. And it's like if you don't believe it matters, then just look at how close, because every single vote I think counts more right now than it ever has. And I think it's a responsibility, right? It's a responsibility. If we care about what happens next, we have to take action today.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, kind of my thought is like, if you don't think your vote matters, like what's the worst that can happen from voting? I mean, really, like if you have any stance on any issue, and regardless of, where your stance is, if you don't think it matters, and if as we can continue to improve the process of voting, like if the process of voting is as streamless as it was in this election, it's really no skin off your back at that point to just sign up for an absentee ballot or show up at your polling place. We have people in the community. I've been able to get involved with our community voting group to make sure the residents are registered to vote. And so if someone's coming to your door and just trying to help you, get registered so you can get your absentee ballot or you can find out your polling place, like, a lot of people are doing a lot of the work for you already there. So if you have any stance at all, even if you're not sure the process is seamless, or, you're frustrated with the process, like really just, it takes one little step then to just go vote. And if you're frustrated with the process, I mean, I'm the kind of person, it's like, if I'm frustrated, I can't just sit back and, sit in the frustration. So even if you are frustrated still with the process, like find an organization that's doing the work that you are passionate about, and just see what you can do. Give them some of your time, give them some of your money, if whatever you can do. I feel like it's just so important. Like it's our country, and you have to really feel empowered in that it's our country and we can make the changes.
And that's it. And if you are frustrated, and I'll speak to that point, getting involved is how you reclaim that power in
Yes.
learning and really getting into the belly of whatever beast you're battling. And
Exactly.
that's how you can ensure its defeat. So
Mm-hmm.
that's it. Another
Yeah.
recipe.
Yep. Just like Wes has said, we've seen it's working, you know. We see the
Exactly.
frustration, people start to mobilize, and you know, this is the great outcome we've had so far. So, you know, there's so much more to be done, but it's clearly showing that it's working. So get
Love it.
involved however you can. That's my plug.
That's it. That's it. And Wes and
We'll be
Sheree.
doing more
Oh,
legal observer trainings soon. So if you
that's
are
right.
listening to this
There you go.
and you want to
Loved
be a
it.
legal observer for the runoffs, I'm going to be training more legal observers and hopefully staffing. Like, I would love to staff every county. That's going to be one of my goals. We'll see what happens.
Right on. All right, our listeners, you hear that? And
I
then,
think like
Wes and Sheree.
legal observing was really important, especially I think the Wednesday morning after the election, people were a little discouraged with the entire process because Georgia was taking so long.
Yeah.
And there were murmurs about fraud and cheating and discrepancies with the absentee ballots. And just hearing, you know, the audit with, you know, how the absentee ballots, and there was like little discrepancy in my county
Mhm.
with the absentee ballots. And then people were really thankful for our presence and do want to get involved. And
Yeah.
our volunteers are great. A lot of ours in Columbus are retired military, so they're by the book. And they were really like raising their hand and be like, there's too many people standing, or she's not counting. You watch the video, and they were like raising their hands, and they reported things, and they're like, she's counting too fast. And then
Oh,
the election was like, we're not going for speed, we're going for accuracy. And they were really taking this serious and were very good. And both parties were appreciative because they're nonpartisan. So they
that's
were
right.
calling out things from both sides, because in Columbus, there was a Democrat and a Republican at each table. And you could kind of tell because in each of their party trainings, they were told to wear a red shirt or a blue shirt. So it was very easy to identify what party the person was from. So our observers were not calling people out, but, you know, calling out things that were wrong, and they were being
Right.
corrected, and they were appreciative. So I know that they were like, thank you for calling that out, or thank you for showing that.
Mm-hmm. Fort Benning holding it down, right?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of our volunteers are retired military. And when their shift started, they were here like 30 minutes before, because if you're on time, you're late. So I was like, okay, you beat me. But yeah, it's because I went on lunch and they were back before lunch. So, yeah, you're late. I was like, I'm on time. But yeah, so we have great volunteers in Columbus.
Vigilance, yes.
Very.
And then last but certainly never least, Wes.
Sure, it's just great to be part of the process. This is a good way to get involved is to, you know, as Shelley said, join the LO program and become a legal observer. When I was out on election day in Fulton and Gwinnett, everywhere we arrived, you know, the poll workers were glad to see us, the voters were glad to see us, the line warmers were glad to see us. It was just a good feeling. You know, there wasn't a lot going on that day, but I'm glad that we've built an organization and that I'm part of that organization of legal observers for Georgia. And, you know, it's just great to know that we're going to be in place for the runoff and that we're ready to go. So thanks a lot.
And a vigilant, yeah. And a vigilant, reassuring presence of integrity is what our legal observers provide during these historic, crucial, important, whole world's looking elections. And Shelley, Sharice, Monique, and Wes, I feel like I say at the end of every episode, oh my God, this has been my favorite conversation, but it's true. I think you guys just keep one-upping each other as we go along. So thank you for this incredible, insightful conversation. Our listeners are going to enjoy this one, I'm sure, because again, what you guys do is you provide a level of insight and really behind the scenes info for these important elections to our listeners. So can't thank you guys enough for your work on the volunteering end and your time with me for this conversation today.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing on this podcast. I feel like getting everything out there is hugely important. So thank you so much.
Yes, I appreciate that. And it is. It's about the information.
Yeah.
All right, friends, that takes care of another amazing episode. Thanks for listening. For more information about being an ACLU of Georgia Legal Observer, visit acluga.org/volunteer. There, you'll be able to receive more info about being a legal observer, phone banker, text banker, and updates on volunteer opportunities with us as a whole. To check out all of the work we do here at the ACLU of Georgia, and to find all of your voting and elections resources, visit acluga.org. And be sure to follow us across social media at ACLU of GA. Last but certainly not least, be sure to like, follow, rate, and subscribe wherever you stream Liberty is Peachy. We would appreciate it. I'm your host, Kenyatta Kinlodge, reminding you to listen like your rights depend on it. Until next time.